Kevin, I'm feeling away today.
Are you?
Yeah, I am. I woke up this morning and I was thinking that I was very excited for this show. And part of the reason is that we do a lot of editorial and a lot of content centered around what other municipalities, what other local governments are doing, what consulting engineering firms are doing, working with these local municipalities and governments all across the country. Well, different municipalities may differ in terms of topography and geography and weather and all of that, all of those things that go into what they're faced with every day. There always seems to be core issues that cities, towns deal with universally,
Of course.
across the country. And it's always good to hear from other townships, other municipalities, other local governments about how they're improving their systems, how they're improving the ways that they operate related to water conservation or water quality or whatever the case may be. So hearing from other constituents and other leaders within those communities is always important. And that's why I was so excited when I got up this morning thinking about this is what we have in front of us today on this episode. What do you think, Kevin?
Absolutely. I woke up feeling the same. Pretty jacked for this one.
So Kay West, I have to say before we get started that we definitely have an expert and somebody that's going to bring in a lot of perspective, and I'm excited about that. So anytime we have the opportunity to bring somebody on the Water Online show that is going to be able to give commentary on how they are improving the lives of their constituents within the given demographic and geographic area of which they are serving, we are proud to bring that information to you. And I don't want to waste any more time because I would like to welcome our guest as we bring her here onto the show. Her name is Moalie Jose, and she serves on the board of directors for the Maryland Environmental Services. It's a government agency. She was appointed by the governor, and she is also an engineer with Hazen and Sawyer. Moalie, thank you very much for joining us. Welcome to the Water Online show.
Hi, Molly.
Thank you, Kevin and Travis, for having me. Good morning.
I thought we would start off by discussing some of the initiatives that you've helped to advance on behalf of Baltimore Water and the community. So that's where you are locally. That's going to be sort of the center of what we're talking about in terms of what's happening within that community, what's happening within that city, some of the initiatives you have going on within that community. So what initiatives have you been working on to help advance on behalf of Baltimore Water? And we can go into more depth after that, but let's start off with some of the things that you're involved with now.
Sure. So I've lived in Baltimore since 2003, Baltimore County, and I've been involved since 2011 in the Baltimore City Summer Youth Works program. I'm an ambassador, and this is a program that provides summer internship to inner city youth between 14 and 21 years. And each year this program keeps growing. It gets off the streets. It helps over 8,000 youth, high school kids get summer internship. I'm also involved in the YH2 mentoring program, and this is a collaborative effort between Baltimore County DPW, the Public Works, the Mayor's Office, Chesapeake Water, which is a affiliate of WEB, and the US EPA, again, for youth between 18 and 24. In addition, I also served in the Baltimore County Board of Education from 2018 until April of last year. So I'm passionate about education, equity, engineering, and the environment.
It also seems you're passionate about getting the younger generation involved in what it is that we do. So there's very little that's more important than sustaining life and the resources that we have, and that's what water is all about, and that's what's centric to our mission here. And it just strikes me that a lot of what you're doing is bringing in and connecting with the youth in the area. So could you speak a little bit more about that, about why that's important and what your experience has taught you relating to incorporating the youth there?
Yeah, definitely. When I got involved in the program, it was heartbreaking to see the lack of opportunities that was available to the city, Baltimore City youth. There's this one incident that comes to mind, and I was mentoring a kid. He was about 15 years old, and I got him into the Hazen building. I work in Hazen and Sawyer. And this is right downtown. It's a 34, 35-story building. And he came in, and he's lived there all his life. And he said, I didn't even know places like this existed where I live. To me, wow. That was heartbreaking. I thought, we have to do something to make these opportunities available to our most vulnerable children. And the key thing was funding. And serving on the Baltimore County Board, I realized the funding was so inequitable for the city of Baltimore versus Baltimore County. So we always hear about the bad stuff that's happening in Baltimore City, and people always harp on that, but we don't think about what caused that to happen, the lack of funding, the lack of support that's not available to these children. And I think that's where we kind of come in as adults to make sure that we, make sure that these children are heard, that they are provided with opportunities and, for a better life.
Yeah, it's so true. And we're pretty familiar with that. We're located right outside Philadelphia, which has a lot of similar issues.
Like Whitney says, I believe the children are our future.
So these inequities that you're trying to resolve or help out these young children, families everywhere, how do they happen in terms of water and sanitation service? Like if there's inequity there, and what do we do about that?
So when we think about, we talk about developing countries, billions of people lack access to safe drinking water, sanitation. We all know that. More people have access to cell phones around the world than to proper sanitation. Here in the U.S., we also have water issues, albeit not so widespread. So, Travis and Kevin, what comes to your mind when I ask you about recent water issues in the U.S.?
Molly, we'll be the ones asking the questions. No, I'm just kidding. Could you please repeat the question?
What comes to mind when you talk about recent water issues in the U.S.? Places.
Go first.
Go ahead, Kevin. Yeah.
Lead in water.
Yeah. PFAS, right? Accessibility.
Yes. In certain areas.
Mm-hmm.
Water loss or scarcity.
Yep. The increasing use of digital components to be able to measure water, the distribution of water, the quality of water, that type of stuff. So
stormwater management.
So how are we doing?
I mean,
are we doing okay? I mean, we could go on.
You're hitting it right on the head. And so one of the places, Flint, Michigan, Jackson, Mississippi come to mind, right? Unique thing that you need to think about these areas, that both of these are majority minority districts, right? Lower median household incomes compared to the rest of the U.S., or what we could call economically disadvantaged areas. Indigenous communities in the U.S. and reservations suffer from lack of running water and safe drinking water. So we can see there's a direct correlation between poverty, regardless of ethnicity or racial lines, poverty and lack of access to infrastructure, right here in the most developed country in the world.
It is striking, and it's something that we're still working through as a country, as a system. Like, how do we create a more equal system to distribute quality water to the citizens of the country? And one of the things that you noted there in terms of water quality is lead. So lead in water, whether it's Flint, Michigan, or many other places where it's affect. It also, as you mentioned, affects reservations and those of indigenous Americans that live on those reservations that don't have access to clean water. But related specifically to your experience there in Baltimore, so lead in water is a big enough problem, and especially urgent when we're talking about children, right? And where children get access to their water. So what's been your experience working with the Baltimore schools specifically to reduce their exposure to lead in the water?
So since 2016, Maryland had required all Maryland public schools to test for lead in their school water. And this was post the 2014 Flint water crisis. So as a part of a school board member, we do school visits, go with the superintendent to visit various schools. There's over 175 schools in Baltimore County. I recall walking down this one school, and every faucet of water fountain I walked by was bagged with a do not drink message attached to it. And I thought to myself, we live in the world's most developed country, the richest and probably one of the most affluent states, Maryland, in the country. And right here, school children do not have access to safe drinking water because those faucets had tested for lead over 20 parts per billion, which was what Maryland Department of Environment requires you to be the action level. And I have to mention that Baltimore County Public Schools was providing bottled water to these schools that, didn't have, that had lead in their faucets or drinking water. So one of the things that I did while serving on the Board of Education was I issued a directive on the board that I saw that there were a lot of faucets around the schools, 175, hundreds of them, but lead levels over 20 parts per billion. But there was this whole cachet of schools that also had lead between 5 and 20 parts per billion. And we know now, Travis and Kevin, that there's no level of lead that's considered safe. It's really bad, especially for children in developing minds. So I issued that anything over 5 parts per billion should also be shut down and replaced and then tested again to make sure there's no lead. This was actually a few months after I did that. I was, Delegate Solomon from neighboring county and Senator McCray, who works in Baltimore City, reached out to me and asked me to testify as a board of member education and a water engineer for a similar bill that they were going to implement across the state, reducing school lead levels to 5 parts per billion. Now, this bill had some pushback, especially from this large lobbying group that speaks on behalf of all public schools in Maryland for budgetary constraints of swapping out those faucets and retesting some of these counties. And I remember going to testify for the bill, and I met with the lobbying group. He was a lawyer, a really nice guy, and I got talking to him, and he was going to be the person that was going to oppose this bill. And he does, as we all know, lobbyists have a lot of reach.
Sure.
But he was a really good guy, and it was a good lesson of me explaining to him why I was testifying for the bill. So I testified for the bill, and when his turn came to testify for the bill, he had left. He left his written testimony, and the bill passed. It was signed into law by the governor of Maryland in 2021.
So let me get this straight. You litigated off record, and the lawyer was so impressed and so moved by your argument that he just walked right out of the courtroom, right out of the board meeting. That is impressive. Yeah, I mean, there's nothing left to say. That was perfect. Moalie,
well,
most
people will do what's right, especially when it comes to children. It wasn't about me. It wasn't about him. It was about the greater common good for all children in Maryland. And when you bring that up, most people are good people. Mm-hmm. They'll do what's right, given the chance.
That's true. Very true.
So with the passage of that bill, does that supersede any EPA plans to replace lead pipes? Because I think they want to do that by 2027 or so. But is that going to happen quicker for these schools then?
It's going to help. So there were 2 parts. I think with Baltimore, we did not have a problem with the source water. They were testing. There was no lead in the water. So definitely it was coming in through the faucets, the fixtures. So EPA helping, or the lead replacement program will definitely help. But we still have to replace those faucets in the school that are old, rusty, brown water, or high levels of lead.
Right.
So those will still be replaced.
Was this also an issue of impoverished areas, like inequity? Were they the ones less financed, less well-to-do areas? Are they the ones that seem to have the largest issue with the lead?
It actually was across the board. It was more with older schools that were built prior to 1970. So it kind of went across the board, but also to touch to your point about impoverished schools, a lot of the schools are in affluent areas, get a lot of upgrades. They get more funding or they get new schools. So yes, it was less compared to the impoverished areas, but it was across the board.
Yeah, you got to figure high property taxes, newer schools.
Better funded.
Yeah.
Yep.
So that is definitely a line of demarcation there. What are some of the other needs or plans you're assessing for Baltimore moving forward? So we talked a lot about what we're doing from a school standpoint, Board of Education, youth, all of which should be top of the list. But what are some of the other initiatives that you're looking at in Baltimore area?
So just like Philadelphia, where you guys are located, Baltimore is an aging city. They kind of came up around the same time, historical, aging infrastructure, same problems that you have in Philadelphia that we do. Baltimore City provides drinking water to at least 2 million people around the region, the county, and some parts of other neighboring counties. Currently, the Maryland General Assembly has requested a study to help study the regionalization of the Baltimore Water Authority, and that's in the works. So I'm kind of excited to see what recommendations they come up in the next couple of years. And that'll be an exciting time for us in Baltimore. I do remember talking to a politician about it, and they did take out the privatization of that authority as something they're not interested in. They do want to keep it as a public authority.
Very smart. Whenever we're talking about privatizations of anything environmentally focused, there there are certain hurdles and there's certain warning signs that you would need to pay attention to in order to make that decision. So I'm sure that decision was vetted. I'm sure that decision was examined from every single angle. But it's interesting to see that as a whole, it was decided to keep it public.
Could you go, Moalie, into a little more detail on the concept of regionalization and why that's better, or why you're going towards that?
I think there's a bit of a political push on it, and there's Baltimore City. Well, it actually was very smart back in 1900s. The people that were planning the water, sourcing water for the city of Baltimore, went over to the county and purchased all of these source waters, with dams, and they purchased it for the city of Baltimore. So Baltimore City's source water lies in Baltimore County, and 100% of Baltimore County's water comes from the city of Baltimore. So there's that political part where we are dependent on the city of Baltimore for our water, but the source water lies in the county. So because of that, but I have to give kudos to the planners 110 years ago that had such foresight to protect that source water, so it can help provide us. So I think, there's always the talk of we need more say into what's funding, what's happening. And I think that AMI was a perfect example where it was 400,000 meters that were installed in the city and Baltimore County, and it wasn't implemented correctly. So I think there's a lot of wanting to have a seat at the table, more of a seat at the table. So regionalizing thing would probably help. And I think that's where it's coming from. It's a political initiative. As you can see, it comes from the Maryland General Assembly. I'm kind of looking forward to see what the recommendations are of this group.
I'm glad you noted 110 years ago, because you mentioned at the beginning the 1900s. And I'm like, well, Kevin and I were in high school in the 1900s. So I don't think we're like that old. We go back that far when it's referenced as the 1900s. So I'm glad you clarified.
Makes us sound old.
Right, it does.
But.
Right, exactly. But no, I'm past it. I'll be working through that this week, I'm sure. So I imagine the challenges that Baltimore faces resonate with a lot of our audience, a wide reach of our audience. Do you have any advice for others undertaking large, socially important water initiatives?
So Kevin and Travis, you guys talk to a lot of people, so I really would like to hear what you guys have to say about that too. But for me, this is something I always tell students and youth that I mentor. Many people, you and me, people don't realize the power of advocacy, right? We don't realize that our voice has power, especially as a collective voice. Social media is a vein, but it's also a room. And if we can use it to advantage and harness that power for good, I think we can bring about change. One suggestion I always give students and children is show up, speak up about things that matter to you, your communities, whether it's a new park, education, human rights, speaking up for those who have no voice. And most importantly, regardless of your political leanings, climate change is happening. And so show up for our democracy, and here's a little plug, vote.
Right.
What do you say to that, Kevin, in terms of like your input based on the things to keep in mind before somebody starts a socially relevant?
I would say I've heard find yourself a champion, someone, a cohort of sorts, because, there's different factions, different arms of decision-making in these processes. And you need someone by your side and someone who will sort of pound their fist on the table for you, advocate for you and that cause. So make those connections and find like-minded people and help you get it through.
Without a doubt. I would say that constituents play a large role in the communication between government, whether it be local or state level, and the constituents, those that pay the water fees and also contribute from a tax standpoint. When pressed and when presented a socially important issue, a socially relevant issue, the good nature of everybody seems to come out, regardless, as you had pointed out, where you are on the political spectrum or where you are socioeconomically. People and constituents are inherently good people. So when they're faced with and presented something that will have a cost associated with it, but the social relevancy and the benefit to the community overall is at stake, most of the time, the those constituents are going to step up. So the communication between the local governments, the municipalities, is vitally important as it relates to getting to the constituents and getting their buy-in and keeping them in the loop, making them feel as if they're part of the solution, which they most certainly are. So communication between government, municipalities, the water company, and the constituents and the customers is vitally important before you even start anything that's revolutionary in terms of water initiatives, water quality, access, all of those things. So just keep that in mind. Communication to your customers and constituents is vitally important. So with that, Moalie Jose, anything else to add before we let you go? Because you're busy. You're on board of directors. You're an engineer with Hazen and Sawyer. You're an important, upstanding member of the community. So I'm sure you have appointments going from now until the end of the day. Anything else to add? Any parting shots of wisdom for our audience?
No, this was great. Thank you for having me. You started off, Kevin, talking about technology. I do want you're going to have future guests. I think one of the things that I would like to reemphasize is that we are at this cusp of technological advances, and some things we need to ask ourselves is how can we use technology and innovation to create a world where every human being and every child has access to safe, reliable drinking water and sanitation in the water sector. So that's something I'm going to leave you with.
That's a great.
Thanks for having me.
I think everybody can get behind it. It was an absolute pleasure having you, Moalie. Thank you very much. For all of you out there, we want to thank you for spending your time here with us. And on behalf of Kevin and myself, we will see you next time on the Water Online Show.